Hello, everyone. I'm just going to let people kind of come in, and I think someone might need to fetch Will again. um, as you can hear the traffic, I'm just getting home from work. I had to work late, but that's all right. So, first, I'd like to say hi, Stephen. So good to see you. Such a pleasure. And Brian, thank you guys so much for coming. And hello, Miss Scabra. It's good to see you guys. So, how are you holding up, gentlemen? That is the guild.
I am very well. I'm very well. I figured it was. Figured it was. I'm good. I'm good. Currently, just got back from my round 38 rival battle with the Joker, and fortunately I won this one. He didn't bring his green gas today, so good. Very good. Bit of a side effect, but that's why I'm here to cleanse my brain with a bit of C.S. Lewis.
Good Batman. And Ms. Dominique, how are you this evening, lovely lady?
I am very well, my dear. Sitting down, trying to get some last minute work done as we await the arrival of Mr. Will, but he has not responded to any of my messages. So I don't know.
Well, he was very, he was very excited. He told me for the space, but I think he needs a new alarm clock or something. I think he needs maybe more like a time bomb than a alarm clock. But yeah. So whatever. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. What time is it actually there, gentlemen?
There's my microphone. 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. Excuses. I'm teasing. And so basically, you want to just kind of give a brief recap, actually, Dominique, to Tuesday, because again, these next two letters lean back to those chapters. And also, guys, if you want to follow along while we go through the letters, or while gentleman reads the letters, playing the part of Uncle Screwtape again. um, they're down in the comments, and I'll put them up in the Jumbotron as well. So you want to go ahead and give us a recap, Dominique?
Sure, I hope I can do it justice. It was a great space. We had the understudy and the gentleman in the role of Uncle Screwtape, and he did a fabulous job. Thank you for that. And so last week we did Tuesday we did 21 and chapters 21 and 22, which was, as always, a little bit of a rerun of previous themes, but we were looking at primarily,
We'll start with time. We'll start with
yes,
mine first.
yes. So the focus on time and what is time and how absurd it is for us to be preoccupied as humans, because heaven and hell don't really factor time into their landscape. Um, and of course, he, touched briefly on the notion of chastity and then possessiveness, and the ability to get humans to revisit who God is in light of their own creation of God rather than who he actually is, and how useful that is for them. And then we jumped into the next beautiful rage of Uncle Screwtape, as the patient fell in love, and with the worst kind of woman, because she is truly a Christian, which of course we remember from the earlier chapters that was exactly the opposite of what was to happen should they bring a love interest into the picture. So, and then he, of course, with the climax, the end of the chapter, with his transformation into a centipede, and how content he was with this, and what this transformation meant. And then we had some beautiful references, and Dear Heidi brought us to an understanding of what that looked like from the perspective of Milton. So, yes, time, my, and let's see. Oh, melodies and silence. and how atrocious that is for their father, that they prefer noise. I don't know if I did a good job as I try and wrap my head around everything we talked about and then what we're going to be getting into today. Gentlemen, do you want to add anything to that?
I'm sat here, sort of just listening to you guys and ready to get into it. So,
Very, very good. Can anybody hear me? Okay, cool. Because I lost connection and I had to leave. I was like, oh no. So, all right, well, very good. So, also, I would like to mention that our dear friend Stephen is only 300 followers away from 100K. So, congratulations to you, sir. Bravo, well done. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get into this. It's chapter 23. I'm putting it up in the Jumbotron and it's also in the comments if you'd like to follow along. Thank you.
my dear Wormwood, through this girl and her disgusting family, the patient is now getting to know more Christians every day, and very intelligent Christians too. For a long time, it was quite impossible to remove spirituality from his life. Very well then, we must corrupt it. No doubt you have often practiced transforming yourself into an angel of light as a parade ground exercise. Now is the time to do it in the face of the enemy. The world and the flesh have failed us. A third power remains, and success of this third kind is the most glorious of all. A spoiled saint, a Pharisee, an inquisitor, or a magician makes better sport in hell than a mere common tyrant or a debauchee. Looking round your patient's new friends, I find that the best point of attack would be the borderline between theology and politics. Several of his new friends are very much alive to the social implications of their religion. That, in itself, is a bad thing, but good can be made of it. You will find that a good many Christian political writers think that Christianity has begun going wrong and departing from the doctrine of its founder. At a very early stage. Now, this idea must be used to encourage once again the conception of a historical Jesus, to be found by clearing away later accretions and perversions, and then to be contrasted with the whole Christian tradition. In the last generation, we promoted the construction of such a historical Jesus on liberal and humanitarian lines. We are now putting forward a new historical Jesus on Marxian, catastrophic, and revolutionary lines. The advantages of these constructions, which we intend to change every 30 years or so, are manifold. In the first place, they all tend to direct men's devotion to something which does not exist, for each historical Jesus is unhistorical. The documents say what they say and cannot be added to. Each new historical Jesus, therefore, has to be got out of them by suppression at one point and exaggeration at another, and by the sort of guessing, brilliant is the adjective we teach humans to apply to it, on which no one would risk 10 shillings in ordinary life, but which is enough to produce a crop of new Napoleons, new Shakespeares, and new Swifts in every publisher's autumn list. In the second place, all such constructions place the importance of their historical Jesus in some peculiar theory he is supposed to have promulgated. He has to be a great man in the modern sense of the word, one standing at the terminus of some centrifugal and unbalanced line of thought, a crank vending a panacea. We thus distract men's minds from who he is and what he did. We first make him solely a teacher, then, and then conceal the very substantial agreement between his teachings and those of all other great moral teachers. For humans must not be allowed to notice that all great moralists are sent by the enemy, not to inform men but to remind them, to restate the primeval moral platitudes against our constitutional concealment of them. We make the sophist or the sophist. He raises up a Socrates to answer them. Our third aim is, by these constructions, to destroy the devotional life, for the real presence of the enemy, otherwise experienced by men in prayer and sacrament. We substitute a merely probable, remote, shadowy, and uncouth figure, one who spoke a strange language and died a long time ago. Such an object cannot, in fact, be worshipped. Instead of the Creator adored by its creature, you soon have merely a leader acclaimed by a partisan, and finally a distinguished character approved by a judicious historian. And fourthly, besides being unhistorical in the Jesus it depicts, religion of this kind is false to history in another sense. No nation and few individuals are really brought into the enemy's camp by the historical study of the biography of Jesus, simply as biography. Indeed, materials for a full biography have been withheld from men. The earliest converts were converted by a single historical fact, the resurrection, and a single theological doctrine, the redemption, operating on a sense of sin which they already had, and sin, not against some new fancy dress law produced as a novelty by a great man, but against the old platitudinous, universal moral law which they had been taught by their nurses and mothers. The Gospels come later, and were written not to make Christians, but to edify Christians already made. The historical Jesus, then, however dangerous he may seem to be to us at some particular point, is always to be encouraged. About the general connection between Christianity and politics, our position is more delicate. Certainly, we do not want men to allow their Christianity to flow over into their political life. For the establishment of anything like a really just society would be a major disaster. On the other hand, we do want, and want very much, to make men treat Christianity as a means, preferably of course, as a means of their own advancement, but failing that, as a means to anything, even to social justice. The thing to do is to get a man at first to value social justice as a thing which the enemy demands, and then work him onto the stage at which he values Christianity because it may produce social justice. For the enemy will not be used as a convenience. Men or nations who think they can revive the faith in order to make a good society might as well think they can use the stairs of heaven as a shortcut to the nearest chemist's shop. Fortunately, it is quite easy to coax humans around this little corner. Only today, let me try that again. Only today, I have found a passage in a Christian writer where he recommends his own version of Christianity on the ground that only such a faith can outlast the death of old cultures and the birth. That's it. That's chapter 23. Unless I'm missing
Actually, yep,
something
it's
here.
it's one final last is he winds it up, yeah.
And the birth of new civilizations. Now my phone's doing something. You see the little rift? Believe this, not because it is true, but for some other reason. That's the game. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
So bravo as well as always. So this is the question about now, because he's dating this nice young lady, she has these Christian friends that he's surrounded by. He's talking to him about how to get what to focus on in their minds as they perceive Jesus and they perceive themselves as Christians. And a couple of interesting things, and I'm going to go to Dominique first. But I would also pose this question. Where do we see this sort of academic Christian behavior the most? I have an opinion. I'd like to hear everyone else's. But where do we see this sort of academic Christian behavior in anybody? You guys have an opinion?
Can you elaborate a little bit when you say academic?
Okay, I guess I'll say I thought maybe academic would give a hint. Parochial school. Parochial school and the halls of academia in Christian universities. I think that that's where we see this sort of prestige culture amongst Christians the most. I do have some direct experiences with this, but because academics are the easiest people to keep focused on academia. And when you hear people talk about theology, or like it could be even a scholarly theologian, it, they talk about Jesus as this historical figure and all of the things that were going on in and around Jerusalem at the time and what was in Rome and then he came and it's just this man lived at one point and we know that he did and he influenced the entire world. You see what I'm saying? So that would be one of my points to jump off, just in terms of where we mainly see this type of um, scholarly Christian that thinks they're a little bit better than everybody else. And frankly, I'll admit it. So, so anyways, so please, Dominique, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So I kind of, when I was reading it, I was looking at it in a slightly different direction, but this app, I guess, applies as well. And firstly, the first thing I want to say is, the halls of academia at the university levels, especially, and then grad schools as well. Those are the places that preserve um, ideologies that may die culturally, but they remain alive and well. And so this is my preface for what I want to kind of touch on here.
I'm sorry, Dominique's about it. Real quick, guys. Anybody that just came in, the letter is up in the jumbotron there. So there's two different screenshots. So if you want to kind of read along while we're talking about it and share any of your insights, please do that. I'd like you to have the best experience possible. Thanks. Sorry, Dominique.
That's okay. So one of the things that came to mind in reading this is very recently I ended up watching a short video by Trent Horn. If nobody's ever listened to Trent Horn, he's actually a pretty good apologist, I think, for a young man. And he was discussing something that he referred to as political Christianity. And this just jumped out at me throughout reading this whole chapter. This idea of Christianity being something that is utilitarian, and that was kind of my view of it, like a utilitarian Christianity, not for people to believe at the core of it that is transformative, because when you believe in Christ and you delve into that deep faith of knowing that he is truly the savior, it is transformative at every level. But this utilitarian Christianity is a way of looking at the practicality of Christian principles. And this is what he seems to touch on when he talks about, Marxian and the historical Jesus, and then applying it to things like Marxism and revolutionary lines. And this brought up liberation theology, which is something I had studied years and years ago, back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, and how people will take Christian principles and try and use them to apply to their ideologies, making them more palatable and less threatening. Right. And so people will say, well, Marxism works really well with Christianity and communism because, Christ wanted everybody to have everything, right? And he loves everyone. So, and that simplification, because again, you're not going to the core of it. And I love at one point where he says how much the enemy despises using, Christ and this historical Christ. And I'm trying to find the place here. And I can't, and I'm not going to now. It'll probably come to me later. But how this is not what God intended, obviously, as Christians. Oh, and good, the gentleman is going to find it. Then one last thing, the idea also of converts, early converts, and our enthusiasm, and how. Oh no, and I'm in the wrong one. Sorry, I jumped chapters.
No, actually, I think let me guess at where you're going with that. A good many Christian political writers think that Christianity began going wrong and departing from the doctrine of its founder at a very early stage. Now, this idea must be used by us to encourage, once
Yes.
again, the conception of the historical Jesus. In the last generation, promoted the construction of the historical Jesus on liberal and humanitarian lines. And we now putting forward a new historical Jesus, a Marxian, catastrophic, and revolutionary lines. The advantage of these constructions, which we intend to change every 30 years or so, are manifold. I mean, that's that.
That's it.
Please go ahead, gentlemen. Or I'm sorry, please, Dominique. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I did, but I have to find it. So let gentlemen go.
Okay,
I'll pick
sure.
up after.
And by the way, hey, welcome, Katie. Good to see you, Lewis. Some of my brightest and dearest friends are in here. Even Adele is pretty cool sometimes. No, I love Adele. She's one of my best friends. Anyways, so but welcome, guys. And again, just to kind of give a little bit of contextual or context to what you're hearing. You're hearing the Screwtape Letters, and these are a collection of letters from a senior devil, Screwtape, to his junior devil, Wormwood, on how to tempt human souls to hell. And essentially, when you hear of the enemy, they're talking about God. Our father below is Satan. And this young man, it's in the early 40s. He's a new Christian. He's in his 20s. He could be called up to war. It is told him how to act as a new Christian, or regard other Christians, and how to really focus on prestige versus being a Christian. And then finally, he just met a young lady who's going to be very good for his life, and this has Screwtape pissed. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Thanks, Honey Badger. Before I go any further with my comments, I want to give a shout out to my lady Courtney, who has also just graced us with her presence
Oh, hi,
in the
Courtney.
listener section.
Yeah, I just followed her the other
Just
day.
down and listen.
Sorry.
Yeah. So there's a lady in pink down there as well, looking very elegant as always. So pleasure to have you here, as always. Something that was really interesting, which was a particular passage in the fourth and final page of this chapter, was got it here, and that is that, on the other hand, we do want, and want very much, to make men treat Christianity as a means, preferably of course, as a means to their own advancement, but failing that, as a means to anything, even to social justice. And it got me thinking, and I was sort of rattling it round in my head and conceptualizing it, but I realized, and let me know, Honey Badger, if this is normal practice in these rooms, but there is a post I made recently sort of covering a bit of that aspect of this that kind of perfectly breaks down what my thoughts would be. Is that free to share?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So I'll put it in the Jumbotron as well, but I'll also read it out to you guys. It's not too long. But that is title Christianity, Heaven and Hell. So, for as long as I remember, Christians have debated each other over which grants you access to heaven. Some say it is by keeping faith and that no one loses salvation. Others say it is the work you do here, or being a good person. Now, that particular statement speaks to what Dominique was saying, which was about this idea of either being utilitarian or being, forgive me, I can't remember what you'd said word for word, but more faith based outside of the purely practical utilitarian side. Please feel free to pull me up on that if I misunderstood that.
Transformative.
But that's it, transformative, that's the word you use, thank you. But then that's kind of what that particular part came to. But to continue on, It said, and excuse me, I was being a little bit satire here as well in this post, but it said, for some idiotic reason, there is a debate over one or the other. And I want your guys' thoughts on this. Each one claims the other is wrong. Reasons for this is 1, low comprehension, which is those that are purely utilitarian, which in brackets says works only. 2, selective learning fueled by vanity to excuse covert degenerate behavior. Faith only, in brackets. 3 is bastardized versions of the texts being misperceived or changed through the ages, in brackets both. Or 4, the difference between people who are accountable for their actions and not, which is in brackets both again. The truth of it all, both faith and works harmoniously are what constitutes the path to the golden gates in biblical teachings. The idea that salvation is for everyone and nobody can ever lose it is essentially saying anything goes as long as you repent. This is false. Here is the history behind it. Now again, I want your guys' perspectives on this, but this is just of my own research. An example I used was you have 2 countries. 1, a country where the state has more power than the church. The result, higher crime rates and degeneracy or bastardized teachings. Reason, in such countries the church has no power to punish or condemn, so criminals or darker minds see the church as a place to excuse and feel better about the bad things they do, so they repent and do it again. This is a modern Western bastardized version of the faith. 2 is a country where church has more power than the state. State answers to church. Result, lower crime and better social values and community. The reason is people fear a higher power far more than their fellow man. Why? Because it is far less controllable. Humans only do what they believe they can get away with. They only have reason to fear it through knowing such power, church, can and will punish them. In this scenario, the church is not a place for degenerates to clear their conscience and excuse themselves. They are cast out, so will often seek redemption, and upon doing so live reformed lives. Conclusion is the faith overall idea of reaching heaven comes from a manifestation of a country number 1, as stated above. Bastardized through the modern era. Results in bad behaved people justifying themselves through I remain faithful to God through belief regardless of my actions. The works overall comes from other bastardized countries, often communist, where political leaders lead people to believe if they do not work or slave away, they will go to hell. Simplified, forgive me guys, this was longer than I remember. Almost there. Faith and works is the true harmony of ascension. This is the origin of this work. The intertwining of the physical and spiritual planes, work and faith, through the middle, the mind that integrates both. Do not let those in power lead you to believe one or the other is true only. This is intentionally provoked to divide people and ultimately destroy religion in the West. In quotation marks, put out the message and let the people destroy themselves. Now, to tie that back, and I wanted to read that for you guys, into what was covered in that chapter, is that passage where they talk about the means of how people use religion, and also the fact that it covers the politicized use of religion. And I thought that breakdown kind of really spoke to that as well. So I'll welcome thoughts there. I've talked long enough here.
So actually, it's very specific, and I would go to James 2, and give me 1 second. I'm trying to add up my girl. I would go to James 2 actually, where it essentially, and I'm trying to find the exact passage. James 2, where are you? It is 2. Okay, here we go. But some will say, "You have faith, and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I by my works will show you my faith. You believe that God is one? You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be shown your foolishness, fellow? That faith apart from works is barren. Was not Abraham, our father, justified by works when he offered his son Isaac upon the altar? You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by works, and the scripture was fulfilled. which says, Abraham believed in God, and it was reckoned to him as righteous, and he was called the friend of God. So you see, I would say, like, I guess the analogy that I would give is like faith without works is like a screen door on a submarine. Your faith is reflected in your works, or it should be. And so one of the things, but hearkening back to this letter, as you said, is that the people that he's speaking of, her Christian friends and her circles, have this tendency to put their works as most important, and then their faith is most academic or political or politically expedient. And he mentions social justice in that realm as well. And we see that for example, I'll just put it out here, Nancy Pelosi. Oh, she's all about social justice, but she supports abortion up and through the 9th month. So is her faith being reflected in her works, though she calls herself altruistic and an educated Catholic? Go ahead, Dominique.
Absolutely, Nancy. And again, it comes back to this idea of, well, I think we end up touching again on the idea of making God in our image as opposed to us being created in God's image and then trying to attain an understanding of Him through that very difficult journey. This passage here, no nation and few individuals are really brought into the enemy's camp by the historical study of the biology of Jesus, simply as biology. And then he goes on to say a little bit further, the earliest converts were converted by a single historical fact, the resurrection, and a single theological doctrine, the redemption. And so this is what happens when we focus on the material Jesus. And we see this all the time when people say, well, yeah, okay, he was a historical figure, he was a really nice guy, he was pretty cool. And Lewis has a great quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't think of the quote off the top of my head, where he says, when you believe in Christ, you have two choices. Either you believe he was who he said he was, or you don't. And you can't say he was a nice guy, he was a good guy, he had some good things to say, because you're neglecting the fact that he also said he was the Son of God. So therefore, if you don't believe that part, he's a liar or a crazy person. So it's really, it's quite black and white in that sense. And then the other thing I guess I want to go back to just briefly is when we have a culture that is lost with this huge vacuum because we've been told to abandon God. Um, we have this hole that we try and fill, but we don't want to take the steps and do the work of truly entering into this transformative experience of exploring and understanding and trying to wrap our lives around being a Christian. We want to be able to have our cake and eat it too. And that's what Screwtape is counting on, right? That we're going to give them snippets so that they start using God, which angers him, but they're going to use it out of context because they're not doing the hard work.
And to just follow up on that too, that who at that point, if we say we're Christians, and like you said, I think that it was also Peter Kreeft who said Jesus Christ was either a lunatic or a liar. Or I'm sorry, he was either a lunatic, a liar, or the Lord. There's no, you cannot have it both ways. And so if he is truly Lord, then simply borrowing from his teachings as it serves me best. Who is truly Lord and who is truly servant at that point? Aren't we just basically reducing Jesus to like our lackey at that point? And I forgot the other thing I was going to say. Did you want to follow up, gentlemen?
No, I actually love that sort of analogy actually, and it's why again we see all the time, and I use the part in the sort of text I just read in terms of how we see that manifest in nations, comparing, let's say, Russia in the 1700s to America now, right? It's completely different opposites. Even Russia to America present day, right? In the way that religion is manifested in a society, and you'll find more people probably here using religion as a means of, again, for those more self-serving regions, than you would in other more radical regions in the world. Why? Because it's about the power and the authority that the church has, ultimately. So it's fascinating to see the cross-section between religion and how it's politicized, between that bridge between the church and state, and that power dynamic that constantly goes on. So, yes, brilliant. Dominique, actually, wait, was it who had their hand up first? Was it Adele?
It was
Dominique?
Miss Adele. Hello,
I
my
just,
lady.
hey, how are you? I just wanted to rebut what he just said, but definitely if, Dominique and him are having it back and forth, I can come back to that.
No, you can just not shoot off your mouth in my space, first of all, chick. So just say what you're going to say, otherwise I'll kick you.
Well, I was going to say that I don't know if there isn't a lot of parallels, because in Russia, they had a lot of communism within the church. And over the last century, there has been a buildup of communism within the church in the United States and the West. And that is contributing a lot, I believe, to the downfall in society. So I think there are a lot of correlations with old school Russia and the West today.
I would submit that that actually happened prior. Well, actually, that happened because of the Bolshevik Revolution, and prior to that, it was not communist. And taking it a step forward, um, what that also ushered in was modernity, on its face. It was modernity that, caused a lot of poorly catechized Christians to believe that communism or Marxism aligns with Christianity, particularly Catholicism.
Well,
Catholicism
it
has been.
aligns with the communal living, but then they feed on that and they take it one step further and dismantle the Christian beliefs.
So again, these are poorly catechized people that we're talking about. So essentially, and I would go back to the Bible for that. When you consider even the parable of the 3 talents, that concept absolutely flies in the face of what Christianity truly teaches. In so much as the gifts that a person is given and what they do with them, and also we are not all given the same potential. We're not given all the same potential, but you do the best you can with what you have to work with, and life isn't fair. Life isn't fair, and we were not promised anything in this life. None of us were promised the ability to walk when we were first born. And so all of that is absolute heresy as far as the Catholic faith actually teaches. But I do understand the critique very much because, again, as as Fulton Sheen said, you won't find 1,000 people in the United States that hate the Catholic Church, but you will find millions of them that hate what they believe the Catholic Church is. So did you want to follow up with that, Adele?
Well, I was going to say that C.S. Lewis in the Screwtape Letters, just to bring it back to the title, he does talk about humor. There's a quote in there about how laughter is, gives humans or humanity the ability to repel despair, and that is one of the tools that they use is despair. And so I always come off as, usually in spaces with humorous
Oh,
type
I love
things.
laughing at you. I love making fun of you. I have a little party in my head when you come up because what am I
But
going to
that's,
say to her?
yeah, I mean, you gotta laugh at life, and even if we're not all equal and we don't all get dealt the same cards, and I know for, as well as anyone, we don't. And but I think that if you can laugh at yourself, that is one of the best things, and I love that he references that in the book.
Yeah, you should get to know Will if you want to see that in its full glory. And by the way, welcome, Sleeping Beauty. How are you feeling?
I'm good. Sorry, I was doing the good Lord's work and on the phone to convert waiting to happen. We sat down and talked with 3 weeks ago. If you know, you know.
I do know. That's awesome. That is awesome. So please go ahead, Miss Dominique.
No, I was just going to, I guess, respond to Adele. I think what you're saying echoes what we've been talking about and that kind of utilitarian approach to faith, and then trying to make it fit our idea of what we want faith to be. And certainly there are powers at work that have been trying to do that for quite some time. So I understand what you're saying, and I think you're right. And we know this. We've seen this happen where we have ideologies that have crept their way into the church, and then they've been repelled. Right. I mean, look at what happened to the Bach brothers in Central America when they tried to kind of pick up arms and fight in a revolution, claiming liberation theology was going to save the poor people of the country. Uh, they got excommunicated. And our Pope John Paul II, wrote very firmly against this kind of ideology coming into the church. So thanks be to God, we do have a mechanism to dealing with that. And then I guess I just wanted to pull up this quote because it really struck me. The Gospels came later and were written not to make Christians, but to edify Christians already made. So I think, using the Word of God, using interpretations of our faith as a means to an end is always disastrous. And we see that as people, again, grasp it for ideological purposes, for an agenda, to use it. And Screwtape talks about that a little further. And I think either the gentleman or Honey Badger read that. So I don't want to read it again. But the idea of being able to use the Gospels, to use the teachings of the church to our own ends is quite dangerous.
Thank you very much. Before we go over to You Live by Faith, now, Will, I'm certain that you already read the letter, or I think I'm certain. Do you have any thoughts about chapter 23 that you would like to share with the panel before we go to Live by Faith?
Actually, I don't know what's been said already, so just come back to me in a second.
Got it. Okay. Welcome, Live by Faith. How are you doing?
Hey, Honey Badger. I love it. I actually was going to start doing the Screwtape Letters a while back, but I host Christian men's spaces and it's been kind of hit and miss. And we were starting to do the whole C.S. Lewis Screwtape Letters till, life got busy. But it's one of those favorite books that I love. And you brought up something that I really want to emphasize that you brought up, and that is, when they were in this chapter and what you guys were discussing about, not only faith, but you're also talking about, putting God basically in a servant's role, right? And if we go back, I think it was chapter 3, the third letter that was written. And Screwtape is talking about how he just went to church for the first time. And he's like Screwtape's trying to get his minion, his subordinate, to get him to start judging people. And I'm bringing that up because if you think
his patient,
yeah,
his patient,
yeah, and he was basically trying to get him to see all the errors of everybody that was at church. And really what that boils down to is Screwtape is trying to get the new Christian, I'll call him Christian just for the reference, to start putting God in his own thought and priority of how he views things instead of how the Bible really does, right? And the Bible is adamant about God being love, right? And so he's trying to get Screwtape's trying to get him to unfocus on the love aspect and become more of the judge, jury, and executioner with his thoughts. And what that does is basically it puts the new Christian in a place of controlling God instead of allowing himself to follow and be submissive and accepting of what God is doing in his life, the transformation, the change, and all that, right? And you guys brought up, I think it was Adele who was talking about faith. And here's something that really kind of connected with me a long time ago. And that was that when we try to think that faith has to fit this kind of box, instead of allowing God to kind of move in our life, and he'll take us in through trial sometimes. He'll take us through growth periods. He'll take us with understanding, but it all comes from that love that he had for us at the beginning. And when we actually put it in a box, we're now hindering our own relationship with Christ through that whole cross thing. He died on the cross because his love was exorbitant and it was unconditional. So you just now limited the growth phase that you have. And now you're also putting yourself above God because you think you can demand how Christianity is experienced by anybody. Now, I'm not saying that limits us, but when we break out of that box, we finally get the whole gamut of what God was doing and understanding that. And I
The
went
thing
through
I
that.
love,
Go ahead.
sorry, just to kind of, to your point, chapter 3 is by far one of my favorite chapters. Why? Because it is so relatable. Keep his mind on his inner life. He thinks his conversion is something inside himself, and his attention is therefore chiefly turned at the present to the state of his own mind, or rather to that very ex- expurgated version of them, which is all you should allow him to see. So, in other words, he's going to church for the first time, and he's seeing his neighbor that he knows is a gossip. Some little usher with a oily expression and squeaky shoes comes and gives him limericks that neither of them understand in a little book. So basically he's turning his mind to, and the reason I say it's relatable, it's like the thoughts that go through your head in mass. It, like the I will be the first to admit it. Sometimes I just have to keep my eyes closed all through mass because I'm trying to focus because of that tendency that I think is put out there, which is, in other words, if all of these people are so ridiculous and he knows they're not good people, then I guess probably their religion is also ridiculous. Did you want to follow up, Liv?
Well, and I think you hit it on the head because, I think even at church, whatever you're doing, the first thing you do is you allow your thought to go, okay, why is this person here? What did they go through? And instead of looking at it with compassion, which is what I believe you're talking about, that's why you try to not focus on it. I think that's where we, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, the way, whatever you want to call it, as long as you got that relationship building with God, if you are start having that whole thought process of, you know, why do they need it, or look at them, they look like they're better than me, or any type of thought that Screwtape used, that he made Christian look at the rich people and be like, well, really? Well, they have all this stuff, and then he was looking down on himself, right? And that's in chapter 3 as well. But when you now start understanding the true care and compassion that God had for Christian or us in general, and he did everything. He did everything, and that love that washes over you starts getting you, hopefully, getting you out of that whole thought process that I'm better off than they are, or they're so much better than me because they have whatever. It, I only brought that up because, like you, Honey Badger, I know our desire to be closer to God. Hopefully, everybody has this desire, is going to help us have a good eye on reality. Reality is none of us are good enough for God, but yet God was good enough to fulfill everything so that we could be close to Him. And when we have passion, we stop looking at people at the outward appearance and ask, okay, what hurt their heart? What can I do to just comfort them? Jesus comforted me. I can do the same, and it gets us off
Yeah,
the judgment.
and that's the line. Yep. Don't allow. We may know these people that he sees in his parish as great warriors in the enemy's camp, but don't let him look at that. Look at their bad shoes, or look at the fact that the cantor sings off key. These types of things. In reality, there's spiritual warfare that is being fought, and it's a battleground that we're in. And what's helped me when I go into mass is I always look at everybody as saints in training. you know and that's just like, look at all the saints. I remember a priest said that one time. It was outside of my presence, but I remember that, and it really stuck with me. These people got up, got cleaned up, brought their 5 kids to mass, and they're crawling all over them, and my goodness, like, that's my favorite part. But anyways, did you want to follow up with
I
that?
just have one more thing. It's kind of just an encouragement. If you can look at someone at church, at the store, at your job, and finally just say, you know what, they got a smile on their face, or they're sad, they're going through something, and you just connect with them in that way, and then just kind of take them upon yourself to just kind of give them that hug, or to applaud with them when they're rejoicing, that you just fulfilled the same thing that Jesus did with us. He cried with us. He encouraged us, lifted us out of the mire. He rejoiced with us. And I think that goes a long way in a world, especially now. We've gone through so many different things, but the best light is the one who actually is willing to give all of themselves to someone and make a difference in their life.
And that being said, I'd like to congratulate you on your engagement, and I hope you stick around for chapter 24, because I think that you will, probably really dig what is to come in regards to this young lady that he has fallen in love with. So thank you so much for that,
Yeah.
Liv. Please go ahead, Will. Sir.
Yes,
Speak.
indeed. So, yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know if this point's already been made, but the thrust of the I can't remember precisely how it's put, but it is the impossibility. It is quite impossible to remove spirituality from his life. Therefore, we must corrupt it. Um, this is the. It's so. I don't know if this has been raised
It has not
already.
been it has not been spoken about yet, sir.
Okay. So if it hasn't been raised, I think that this is, again, so important, and it's important as well. It's brilliant of Lewis to allow this to overlap with the idea of communism, because communism at its heart is like this weird pastiche of, like, this weird parody of Christianity, certainly in the terms that Lewis understood it. Um, it's impossible at a certain point in an individual's life to convince them that God or that this supernatural doesn't exist. Lewis and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. When people go in microdose and when they're taking psychedelics, they'll be atheists to begin with, and they'll come out of it being vaguely spiritual, but ardently and 100% vaguely spiritual. We see so often that this idea of being vaguely spiritual is one of the most hostile um, characteristics to the pursuit of the good and to being rightly ordered in the world that we exist in today. And it's one of the things that we must always be conscious of, this world of feeling and vibes and smooth sayings and soothsayings. It's one thing that we always have to keep our eye on, that just because just because we're standing with our like bare feet on dirt, or praying 6 times a day, or Mercury's in retrograde, or whatever it might be, at the root and stem of it, one of the worst possible things that you can ever allow something to happen to somebody close to you is for them to become vaguely spiritual, because this is exactly the kind of thing that Screwtape is talking about here. Spirituality is God moving first, and us moving in response to the move of God. He always moves first. And vague spirituality is God moving first and us moving in any possible direction apart from towards him. And it's brilliant that he connects this with Marxism.
And that also harkens back to chapter 4, and he's speaking about his state of pain, or his idea of his emotional pain, or what he's going through, and how a toothache would set his set his mind in order immediately. And so it essentially is talking about equating a spiritual experience, or where you're at spiritually, with how you feel. We always expect a return on investment. So, for example, after you pray, you expect to feel better, but you don't always feel better. Sometimes you even feel worse, you know. But to equate your spiritual journey with your emotions is the worst possible slippery slope. Would you like to add on to that, Will?
No, I think that you've had the last word on that, honey, Nancy.
Thank you, sir. Adele, what would you like to say?
Well, I was I mean, I don't want to contradict you. And I think that I'm kind of on board with what you're saying, but at the same time, I think within chapter 23, like focusing on the present and focusing on joy and life and living in the moment and not looking at the past or necessarily the future, but being fully present in the moment and being able to connect with God that way. I feel like that was part of what was being said, but I don't know. And I was watching I hear this from other people too, like kids are dropping out because of social anxiety and things like that. And I think that's stuff that demons prey on. And I feel like that was a part of also what was being said. So some of the emotions, yeah, it's slippery slope, but if it's maybe the right emotions, like living in the moment, being present and trying to experience happiness and with your family or, with what those types of things, I feel like those are good things. That's, I don't know. I guess that was kind of my thought process.
Well, I think so. Again, this is the brilliance of Uncle Screwtape, because he's very good at taking and the brilliant thing is as well that a lot of the things that C.S. Lewis is writing about, the church, the Catholic Church in particular, has subsequently, not because of the Screwtape Letters, has gone on to write about extensively. So, for example, we have this concept of the sacrament of the present moment, which is really the 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 antithesis of just enjoying the moment for what it is. Because the glory of God, as St. Irenaeus describes it, is the glory of God is the human person fully alive, which is sight, sense, taste, smell, all the rest of it, sound, music, feeling, dancing, food, all the rest of it. But um, it has to be rightly ordered. And the present moment, if it's not rightly ordered, can be an enormous distraction. In the present moment, this goes right the way back to the first and second letter, the first letter in particular, about when he's referring to, being in a library or being in the British Museum, and goodness knows how many people have been distracted by, they're on the cusp of a major breakthrough and they go and decide they want to have a cigarette or a cup of coffee, and so on. So there is a way of being mindfully present in the present moment, which Screwtape doesn't allude to. I'm giving you the cheat codes to what Screwtape is actually omitting to say. But there is, of course, the glory of God is being present in, of the human being fully alive in the present moment, tasting, smelling, sensing, enjoying, and so on. But it has to be rightly ordered. And the present moment can be an extraordinary distraction, because the present moment can also be at the same time the antithesis of being capable or interested in looking forward, and also interested and capable of looking back. And to put it one way, I think, as somebody's put it, without memory, without the sacrament of the present moment, we are no better than beasts who can remember no further back than the last meal and hunger for nothing more than the next meal. And that defines the present moment for beasts, because they have no real memory, they have no real sensation. So it has to be rightly ordered, it has to glorify God. And I think that, all in all, this is, what Screwtape always, this is the brilliance of the way that C.S. Lewis is writing, because he just sits on that crack of what is rightly ordered. But it sounds appealing, it sounds brilliant, it sounds defensible. but at its heart, it is a sham, hollow inversion of what is, in fact, rightly ordered. So I think it's a brilliant statement to bring up, that we should be glorifying the human being in the present moment, but not in the way that Uncle Screwtape is suggesting we ought to. And you ought to trust me, because I've been Uncle Screwtape for quite some bit. So I've been inside his head.
I
No,
love
that was great.
it. Oh, that's awesome. Also, guys, I'll be to the regular panel. I'll be like sending you messages, as the conversation goes. Just FYI. Did you want to jump in, Miss Dominique?
Yeah, I guess I just quickly wanted to address, and hopefully I'm not being redundant, what both Will and Adele were saying about living in the present. And I think, Will, you put it beautifully, properly ordered. And we are called to live in the present. And I was trying to find the quote and I can't find it anywhere. But this idea of and what was the term you used, Will, that the church teaches on the
The
what?
sacrament of the present
The
moment.
sacrament of the present moment. And if any of you here have ever been to Mass, and in that moment of consecration where we believe that time stops and all heaven and earth are glorifying our Lord and Savior, it's that moment in time where we touch heaven, and it is in the present. And it's in focusing on the future that we become full of anxiety, and that's exactly where the devil wants us. It's not that we shouldn't provide for the future, shouldn't be prudent, but that hyper focus on everything in the future, or even a hyper focus on everything in the past. But to what Adele was saying about experiencing those joys in the present moment, and I guess where I might just push back a tad is this idea that that is an emotional response, because often we have to will being in that moment so that we're not getting preoccupied with other things. We're making a choice. So it's not really an emotional response so much as it is a will to live in that moment and experience that moment, good or bad, and also recognize that it's not forever, that there will be better days, the clouds will part, the sun will shine, and all of that la-di-da stuff from all the great songs.
Yeah, I think to sort of paraphrase, and I think this might be from Dante, but or just paraphrasing it rather, but learn from the past, work in the present, live in the present, work in the present, hope for the future, leave. So no regret, no anxiety, just live your daily life, committed to one moment at a time, and and if you've done wrong, do the next right thing. So please go ahead, gentlemen.
It's been kind of interesting listening to sort of the discourse, and I wanted to sort of offer a bit of a psychological sort of look at how this idea sort of manifests, right? So some of you may or may not be familiar with something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but I've got to kind of run through it on a basic level, right? But to what Will's point was as well, which is I very much agree with, which is getting caught up in this forgive me the term that you used, but it was vaguely spiritual. That's it. And also to, I believe it was Dominique's point, which is where you're getting too caught up in the now, or you're getting too caught up in the future, is a human being's ability to fully embrace a faith can be reflected in this schematic, right? It's super simple. So you've got something called deficit needs, it's called. So that's physiological needs: food, water, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction. Safety needs, so that's obviously having home, employment, resources, health, property. And then there's love and belonging, right, which is friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. And these are all things that those three can lie in the now, the physical sort of present space. And you find that most people get locked into those first three, whether that be religious or not, but especially in faith. People will pray for certain needs in those areas to be filled, but they won't look beyond that. And then you've got, which is where we get to the emotional response. That's where most of the emotional parts come from. So it's needs based. And then you've got the other, what's called aspirational needs, which is where you have esteem, which is self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom, and then you have something called self and social actualization, which is the idea that you're fulfilling your potential as an individual, but there's something beyond that. It's beyond just you. And that's the overall point I wanted to allude to, really. It's that at some point there becomes it's not just about your individual connection to God, it's about how that manifests into community, what you're doing outside of that. And to Dominique's point, not being too caught up in the future or the present, it seems that it's a balance between, psychologically, because of course our brains are the mediary between the spiritual, higher wisdom and the physical. It's having the balance between those deficit needs, but also those aspirational needs. And that's also what balances one or the other out, because if you focus too much on the future and you seek that through this, through your use of faith and religion, or the other, then it's because they're not balanced out. That's I wanted to kind of give that sort of breakdown, maybe from a different perspective.
And that's a good perspective. And the song that just came to mind as you were speaking was Cats in the Cradle. My son came home just the other day, and so his dad could never find time to hang out with his son. And he was always busy, work, going towards the future. And then when he had time to relax and he wanted to have a relationship with his son, his son didn't know him, and he was too busy to speak to him. And so that would be, that just popped into my head, actually. You're speaking, gentlemen. Also, it's so, I love having you, a human behaviorist, well, also a wonderful human being such as yourself, but a human behaviorist with particular focus on how AI affects the human psyche. Is that, that as your profession, not your identity, but it is great to have that perspective here too. So I appreciate you a lot, gentlemen. Please go ahead, Dominique.
Yeah, thanks, Nance. Thank you,
I'm
gentlemen.
sorry, were you going to say something else, gentlemen?
Only that I like how you threw the identity part in there. I'm glad you remember that part of our conversation.
100%. And I know that anyways, because I know you're my friend. Please go ahead, Dominique.
Yeah, thanks for bringing Maslow's hierarchy of needs into the discussion. I think it's an interesting perspective, but I'm going to add a layer to that. The beauty of faith and the kind of trust and transformative experience that a deep faith brings, that Screwtape despises, is that even in our most desperate experiences, it can lift us. So I'll give you an example. I spent some time on a little farm out in Iowa years and years ago, population under 1,000. And the depth and amount of faith-filled human beings I met there was startling relative to even growing up in the suburbs of a big city. And part of that is they are completely reliant on the elements for their subsistence and their survival. And there are seasons when the crops aren't good. They have animals that die, but yet their faith is constant. And so while yes, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is applies, and certainly there are experiences that we struggle with. Aristotle talked about this. How can we reflect upon our existence if we have no time to do so? It is a leisurely activity. But faith is different. And that's what Screwtape struggles with, that even when you have nothing, you can have faith and it will carry you through those most horrendous moments. So I just wanted to add that layer.
Thank you so much. That is an excellent insight, Dominique. You never cease to astound me.
And
Please go ahead. I'm sorry. Yes.
yeah, and if I may just quickly, yeah, the weird. I'm sure that gentlemen and I are going to have some exciting conversations as the you, gentlemen, and my dear friend, Kerry Phillips, who's Welsh, so we'll just be the British Isles against the world. We'll have some good chats. But it's really interesting watching how faith, for want of a better word, queers typical expectations of data around human behavior. One of our first big gigs, literally 2 weeks after we started doing Catholic X, almost 4 months ago now, was promoting Mark Wahlberg's brother's film, Jesus Thirst, The Miracle of the Eucharist. And we did, I think, 6 spaces for them all in all. And if any of you haven't seen it, I don't know if it's still floating around. I got to see it, even though it's not come out in the UK yet. But one of the main segments of it is the story of a Vietnamese priest who was, I think he was a cardinal actually, who was imprisoned during communist regime. And he basically flipped Maslow's hierarchy completely on its head, because all that he asked for every day while he was imprisoned was enough bread and a tiny dram of wine to celebrate the Eucharist. All of his other bodily needs, he completely was not interested about. He was offered, he was given, the opportunity to, he was given a choice between food or bathroom needs or, having a wash. He celebrated the Eucharist every day with the tiniest morsel of bread and the tiniest dram of wine. And this is the kind of thing that terrifies Uncle Screwtape, which is real spirituality, real faith. Because it's almost like looking at quantum physics. When you get down to reality at the subatomic level, things start behaving in exactly the way that you would never expect them to. And this is the way that real faith um, behaves for us on the macro level when it is real and present. So it's I think it's the exception that proves the rule in many senses. And I think it's always important to keep in mind, as I've said before, that as C.S. Lewis says in the prologue to the Screwtape Letters, even Uncle Screwtape is not to be trusted in everything that he says. There are many things outside of Uncle Screwtape's understanding. He doesn't understand prayer. He doesn't understand love. He doesn't understand faith because his whole identity is rooted in the rejection and rebellion against all of those things. So it is, again, I think, as Gentleman brings up that brilliant point about human needs, human faculties, which Screwtape is relying upon. And he is trying to prevent constantly this weird quantum factor in which waves can be particles at the same time, which is what happens when we have true faith in Christ. Um, uh, all of the world gets flipped upside down, and a pyramid is built from the top down rather than the bottom up.
Go ahead, gentlemen.
As I often say to people, if you are disconnected and purely obsessed with the physical world, you sever your connection to that of the metaphysical, spiritual, or that of a higher power, so to speak. And that seemingly is what we see manifest all over in the modern sense. And I like the example you used about the individual who was in prison, focusing purely on that, because I've always viewed that difference between the deficit needs and the aspirational being between the physical and the mental, and mental/spiritual being in one. And it's always like, as we're seeing Uncle Screwtape in this, it seems his focus is purely to sever that connection to anything beyond the physical, which is where you have that obsession, which is where people are desperate, which is ultimately what he wants, because that desperation brings out the sides in people, in humanity, that he so wishes to indulge in.
If I could just sort of add to that conversation about Maslow, So I was kind of raised on it indirectly because the nursing school that I went to was sort of built on that same hierarchy. So basically, the commandments for myself as a nurse, the first thing always is maintain a patent airway. And then up and through that, it finally goes to spiritual and physical needs both being met. So as I'm taking care of a patient, that's my hierarchy. But one thing I would say, and of course at the very top of Maslow's hierarchy is self-actualization. Now, brilliant points you brought up, Will, in terms of what true faith can do for a person whose physical needs aren't being met. Conversely, this highest of the high, in accordance with Maslow's hierarchy, is self-actualization. I would really like someone to explain what self-actualization actually is, and taking a step forward, because I think it's the most ill-defined concept that has ever been conceived of. Because the self, I am actualizing myself. I don't actualize myself. I can't actualize as a self. Certainly, I can work very hard to do very well and, have my heart in the right place for the right reason and, take care of everyone around me. But does that actualize me? Does that really define me? And is this coming from all of my ability to be such an amazing person? So those are a couple of questions I have about self-actualism. Would you like to follow up, gentlemen?
Yes, I can actually speak on that specifically, and this is also one of my qualms with. Well, I'll be honest. The original Maslow's hierarchy of needs actually had another layer to it, which you heard me mention briefly, which is something called social actualization. But as that's been passed down and whittled down by different people, it's sort of forgotten that part. Self-actualization, if I were to define it in a somewhat unanimous way, would be the constant pursuit of one's own potential in any facet. Really, that's that. There is no definitive sort of, oh, okay, great, I'm the best I can ever be, because, well, humans simply aren't that black and white. We are polymath by nature. But I like to refer and sometimes even replace that self-actualization with social actualization, being the shift from this I focus, I am my own bubble, I am the best at who I am, to this, okay, what's more than me? What's beyond that, to your point about helping other people? Because what are other people other than merely a reflection of your own self or your own consciousness? And by working with other people, that's where you, again, like community, and other people can really start to, well, actualize that potential to push people forward as well. And I would suggest that the modern remake versions of this hierarchy have purely been tailored to people of a more self-interested based, hence why they've missed that out. So hopefully that gives a bit more of a history to it.
Well, I think that I can't remember precisely. Thank you, gentlemen. I can't remember precisely how it's how he puts it, but yes, it is. It is the. I think it's the one of the. Forgive me, she's a Britishism, but one of the queerest things about the hierarchy is that you end up. It's really not a hierarchy as much as it is a map towards because you have need, the bottom tiers of the pyramid are need, and then you have this goal of this magical thing called self-actualization, which is really not part of the hierarchy of needs. It is the fruition of those needs being met secondo according to Maslow. And he has a wonderful way of putting it, which um I can't quite remember, but he has a very strange way of putting it, which is something to do with. But yes, I think that the thrust of the weirdness of all of it is that, you know, you're looking at base needs, animal needs, social, you know, all of these things are needs which need to be met, right, supposedly. And then at the top of it, you have this thing that just happens when all of those needs are met. So it's really not, it's really kind of, it's almost like, I don't know how it is in video games when you've collected enough, I don't know, sapphire gemstones or magic crystal shards to buy the magic harp or whatever it is, whatever kids play on the TikTok or whatever it is that they do on their dongle goblin cybernetic gigatree or whatever. But you know, the thing that sticks out in the midst of that, I think that you're right, Nancy, is that this weird thing at the top of all of it is, what is this thing called self-actualization? And this is the problem with this very positive psychological approach, that it's constantly attempting to find something that uses the vocabulary of spiritual fulfillment, which historically was always found in Christ, in the church, in faith, in very abstract, secularized, scientific or empirical terms, and they really couldn't come up with anything better or less dubious sounding than self-actualization. I don't know about any of you, but if I were to self-actualize, I think that that would be the beginning of the apocalypse. If I were to actually be myself, I think that would be a pretty wretched, horrible thing. I think that cats would give birth to litters of snakes, and crows would be beating their wings against the window panes if ever I were to self-actualize.
Do you think we'd finally find the Infinity Gauntlet?
I don't know what that is, and I don't think you know either. And I think
Ah, I see. So
But
not as nerdy as
fortitude.
me in that regard.
The quote was, "What a man can be, he must be." Then this need we call self-actualization. I think that's the one you were looking for. So.
it is indeed, you're a star.
Nancy, are you there? Did we lose her?
Oh,
No,
she
you
might have.
have me. I'm getting a bunch of DMs. Okay, honestly, if you want to know, like a couple people just subbed to me, and I'm trying, like that is extremely ingratiating. I'm sorry, and so I asking for feedback. You know, what are your favorite things about X? How can I support you best? You know, I'm sorry. You know, but you must know I wasn't in the bathroom. Just so anyway, well, you know, also, as the conversation moves forward, and you know, this has been excellent, gentlemen, Adele, Dominique. I love it if um, Faith came back, but and anybody else that wants to speak. But I'd like to welcome Kevin, and you know, thank you for sticking around, Brian. And it's such a pleasure to see Tough, Lewis, Catholic, Andrea, excellent woman, and Jackie, of course, Patrick, Diana, all you guys. You know, I really, I sincerely appreciate your patience and or patience, your presence, and I hope that you might come up and talk to us a bit. So, without further ado, I give you my friend Casey. How are you, sir?
Hello, hello. How are you? Yeah, in fact, I already know the answer to that. You all are doing so wonderful. This book club, I am loving it. So I had to jump in because you started talking about a bunch of stuff that I really, really like. But I kind of lost track of it because it keeps getting so deep. But I'll do my best to recover. So the man in the cell, when he was foregoing everything in sake of fulfilling his religious duty, why does that scare Screwtape? I don't know, but I'll say this much about that type of behavior. It seems reminiscent of insanity, if you ask me, but I'm just playing the devil's advocate. I forgot where I wanted to go with that, because then you guys started talking again about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization, and you know, it crossed my mind that to actualize is to realize in action or make real. So, and that's from the American Heritage Dictionary, by the way. But it just crossed my mind, I hate the example, but at the same time, it's such a good example of it. Trans, the whole trans identity movement thing, as much as I'm opposed to it, that's a perfect example of self-actualization. Those people, I'm not condoning it in any way. I'm just saying, like, what they're doing is they're taking their person and trying to actualize it. So that would be another form of self-actualization, perhaps the negative version of it. But I try to stay neutral. I try not to judge. So, but yeah, the only other thing I wanted to say was I heard someone mention, I think it was Will, talking about how when you go down to the quantum level, things start to act a little bit differently than you would expect. If your expectations are predetermined, then yes. If you're open to exploring and determining what the patterns actually mean and how they pertain to the bigger picture, then maybe not so much, because then it actually becomes just more evidence for what is apparent. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Casey. Just so to put it this way, and I again, I'm not a scientist, but put it this way, if I have, if you have 10 inflatable yoga balls, those inflatable yoga ball things, and you throw them against a wall, they will behave physically exactly the same way as if you throw 10 tennis balls against a wall. But when you get smaller and smaller and smaller, things that are round and things that you throw against a wall do not behave in the same way as anything that we can see in the visible world. That's why that's we kind of that's by the by, but that's kind of the thrust of why even as Einstein said, if I recall correctly, that he said everything in my theory of special relativity is to be found proven true, then within a generation, physics will turn into a new religion. And that is a scary prospect. These are the words of Einstein himself. Because essentially, when people used to make fun of Catholic priests, the words hocus pocus are a parody of hoc est enim corpus est, the words that are said during the rite of consecration, that the priests are hiding all of this secret stuff and so on. We end up with a scenario where scientists are the new priests because they are keepers of secret knowledge, which none of us, unless we've spent our entire lives looking at them and studying them at the micro level, could never possibly understand. So that's kind of the thrust of what I was getting at, and I do defend that point just on that raw basis. If you throw a tennis ball against a wall, it doesn't behave in the same way as a subatomic particle that is also vaguely spherical if you throw that against a wall. But you're right that we need to be open-minded and careful in the way that we think about these things. Why does that act of faith from that cardinal? I've remembered his name. I just actually looked it up. His name is. He died in 2002. His name is Cardinal Van Thuan, Francis Xavier Nangun Van Thuan. Um, why does that scare Uncle Screwtape? Well, of course he doesn't actually. So this isn't like a non-canon response. Screwtape doesn't actually write about him. But the thrust of why such an act of faith terrifies Uncle Screwtape is because it's rightly ordered. Um, uh, it is the inversion of the hierarchy of needs, which is what Christ calls us to be. It is the pyramid built from the top down rather than from the bottom up, which is everything that Screwtape, as we've seen in this journey of reading through the Screwtape letters, is against, which is, gluttony. We had this brilliant conversation when we did that space with the cameras on about, how a kilo of carrots can be an indulgence, or, delicacies or rich foods, tiny plates of food that are very expensive. If you're in a prison and you're fearing for your life, and if you never know whether you're going to see daylight again, it is, in the eyes of the world, insanity that you would want to celebrate the Eucharist rather than have a bath or a wash or a clean change of clothes. But if you know what the Eucharist is, then it is the top of the pyramid, and you build from the top down rather than from the bottom up. And that is the scandalous thing. That's actually the cheat code. That's realizing that you're in the Matrix. This is the thing that Screwtape is constantly pushing Wormwood to baffle, to what does he say? Fundle his patient into forgetting, which is that you know forget, remind your patient constantly that he's an animal. Remind him, either convince him that he has a soul or convince him that he has a body, but never remind him or let him realize that he's got both, and that his destiny in life is to be a spiritual being having a physical embodied experience, that he's incarnate. So such acts of faith, such acts of selfless faith, are the thing that Screwtape really wants to fundle his patient, or Wormwood's patient, into forgetting, are important. So it's really, that's why it's such a revolutionary act. The pyramid upside down being built from the top down rather than the bottom up, which is physically impossible, but in Christ, what we're called to do.
All things are possible. It also speaks to the advice that Screwtape gave in earlier chapters. Allow for excesses in everything except faith and prayer, to paraphrase. Let him be excessive in everything except faith and prayer. So in other words, like that came to mind when you brought up the chapter that we did. One of my favorite spaces actually was on gluttony. Allow for excesses in everything but faith and prayer. And so excess of me, excess of belief in my time, excess in me. And that is kind of like, just to speak to your point, is, I guess, is what I'm saying. So we're going to take the last two hands, and it's getting very late for my British gentlemen friends, that is Will and Gentleman. And if you haven't already, please do follow all of the people that are on speaker. I know these people to be wonderful people in and of their own right. And I would like everybody, to kind of continue these conversations. And I congratulate everyone for not being in spaces where people are actually hitting each other over the head with scripture, arguing about politics, or talking about the Middle East, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, so let's move forward. I would like to welcome Tuff, and then we'll go to Adele, and then we'll move forward to the next chapter. Please go ahead, Tuff.
Hi, Honey Badger. I've always liked your spaces, and this has been very relaxing. I just got off work, and I am enjoying this so much. And Will, I don't know what you do for a living, but you sound like you should do a podcast, or you've written books about this. It's nice listening to how you say things. This is a good format. I heard you
Tuff, you're rugging a bit. You're rugging a bit right now.
Oh, okay. So is this better that I'm closer to the phone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm told I speak too loud, so I try to find a happy medium. So, the quantum topic is what I really like to talk about. I'm a Christian, but I also am into trying to understand how God really operates. And that led me to having faith that God created this system, so he will have a good understanding of everything within it, and it will relate to Jesus. Because I questioned, how could it be that Jesus could atone for everybody's sins? There would have to be a system within nature that would allow a transfer of energy from Christ to us, but him also taking our bad energy or our bad deeds and pulling it from us, and him disposing of it. or neutralizing it somehow. And once I started to ask questions, what systems are there? They started to come to my mind, or I'd run into someone talking about it, and or I had weird things happen to me. And I just encourage everyone, if you haven't done this already, is start to research uh, electrons and magnetism and the periodic table and how it works in atoms, and um also the vagus nerve within our body, and how um, plasma, how energy and data travels in plasma. Once I started to understand those things, I suddenly realized, wow, this is how the spirit realm works. And it never ends. Like, it just keeps expanding into more explanations of things, and it makes it really fun. And then when I read the Bible, I start to see how these things connect. Like, for example, Jesus said, "Who touched me? I felt energy leave me." And some interpretations are, "I felt virtue leave me." So I started thinking, well, what is this thing going on between him and the woman who was suffering with the issue of blood? And what is faith? Like, why does faith increase the possibility of these miracles happening? And why is it that when Jesus was in his hometown, he couldn't perform miracles? So all those questions got me thinking and discovering that it's relating to our attention and transference of data. And I'll end here just to kind of give you an idea of how cool this is. So if you look at a television set, a plasma TV, that image gets on the screen through a plasma stream of RGB, like red, green, blue, and it travels and hits the screen. And we see it from a phosphorus screen. Well, our pineal gland has phosphorus and calcium in it. And so I started, the way I summarize it is it's like we're walking cell phones we're like a big cell phone with arms and legs. We're walking around and we're receiving and transmitting radio frequencies. But here's the key, is that God wants us to be a temple, and so that he can be inside of this thing we are, our bodies, right? And we become holy through our attention on God. The problem is, the other option is to be on our flesh. So that's why everything you guys are talking about tonight is very intriguing to me, and you're putting it in different ways that I'm not used to,
Y- And, and you
labeling
know
it.
what, Tuff? You kind of touched on one of the, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the proofs of the existence of God, and that is the argument from design. And so nothing that you're saying is not rightly ordered in that sense, because, and so, like, maybe to put in more practical terms, sin affects everybody. Okay, so in a spiritual sense,
Right. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
and so, but it absolutely in the physical realm does too. And I really love that you brought that up, because there's genius in there's genius in Catholicism if you delve into it. And that's one of the things that I would say. But also, I put, just for that point, I put the 5 proofs of St. Thomas Aquinas down in the purple pill if you want to look them over as well. So, but those are all excellent points. Thank you so much, Duff. I appreciate you. And so, Miss Adele, final word, and then we're going to get right back over to Uncle Screwtape.
Yes. Oh my goodness. My notes are a mess. I always try to actively make notes in this piece because there's a lot going on. But I did want to say that I have 100% belief in God. So where I come from when I'm saying things, I have no doubt in my mind. So it's the life that I've lived. And I do think living a life of thankfulness and gratitude. I don't usually pray for anything from God because He's already given me so much. But there has been a few times in my life where I have prayed for something, and I've also asked everybody else. And like my daughter, when I was pregnant, they were telling me that she was, going to have all these health problems and all these issues. And the power of like collective prayer and what Tuff was saying, it just kind of brought me back to that. Like it made such a difference, because 2 weeks before I had her, there were still all of these birth defects and problems. But when she was born, she was basically perfectly healthy. And I think that there is something to the energy that we have, the power of collective prayer. And we don't understand the spooky science, but I also always try to bring back the Bible to science. And the one thing that struck me the most was when God spoke, basically everything was created. And what that goes right back to science. What happens when someone speaks? Things vibrate, that makes sound. And I think that that is an actual line. Like, just bring it back to the absolute simplest form. God spoke. That was the creation because of what happens when you speak. And I think that that brings it back to science. But yes, if you get into science, there's just proof after proof after proof that he's
and
real.
spiritually, and
Yeah.
spiritually, and this is one of the things that Saint Louis de Montfort talks about when we pray the Rosary. And in reality, if you pray the Rosary in a group, what happens is, if a person's mind is wandering or they're having trouble concentrating, the fervent and reverent prayers of another person who's praying with them will make up for their inability to concentrate or to focus. And so it's this is not foreign to any Catholic. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if everyone knows this, but it was a Catholic Monsignor, name escapes me, a French Catholic Monsignor, who conceived of the Big Bang Theory. So that's just a bit of academia. But this has been excellent. So I'm gonna go back and let's kind of try to refocus on the book. Great conversation and stuff, but this is our jump off. So Screwtape has been really railing on this young lady that the patient is starting to date, because she's a good Christian, she's a good girl, and she's not just a good girl, she's she's a strong woman in the best way possible. As a matter of fact, he calls her a two-faced little something or another in the last chapter, because she's the kind of person that belonged in the Colosseum, in other words, thrown to the lions. And she looks like she could faint at the sight of blood, but would smile as she was dying. And so, he just went through her. He just went through the people that she's surrounded by, which are basically, I mean, they're Christians, and not only that, they're good people, and they're even educated Christians, and how to work on keeping them in this idea of Jesus was a man, and looking at it from the sort of academic and historical perspective. And Will added the best point when I'm sorry, Will, could you just touch on your first insight when you first spoke about the chapter?
Apropos, excuse me. Apropos, spiritual. Kerr is giving thumbs down because he's just jealous because I'm funnier than he is. When I was talking about spiritual, being inauthentically spiritual, right? Is that right, Nancy?
Yes.
Yeah, so one of the greatest tricks that Screwtape is encouraging Wormwood to apply to his patient is encouraging them to be inauthentically spiritual, which is to say, to quote the God Warrior from Trading Spouses, because they only believe in the moon and the gods and the this and the that and the Buddha flags, right? That there's a very hollow kind of sham spirituality that human beings, find very comforting. It is a Christ without a cross. It is a spirituality that is hollow of everything apart from it's reaching towards recognizing that there is something invisible. There is an invisible reverse
Superficial?
of our lives, right? But uh, it is an inauthentic pastiche of the spirituality that Screwtape is absolutely terrified of any of his patients getting within arm's length of, which is a spirituality that is devotion, sacrifice, piety, humility, love, justice. But instead, it's very kind of abstract. I'm a very spiritual person, but it costs me nothing because it's all on my terms. Mercury's in retrograde and all this kind of stuff.
And so, with that being said, that was a perfect way to end it. I got to tell you guys, I bought this book. It's called the Screwtape Letters and the Catechism. And so I reference back to it in each, like, it goes through each chapter and it goes through the catechism and gives a few quotes and some meditations. I got to be honest, it is really falls short of this conversation because I mean, I'm finding it just like really. It has nothing on this conversation, and I'm kind of regretting buying it, to be honest with you. But so to me, that's an extreme blessing. So without further ado, we are going to move on to chapter 24. And also, guys, again, I put it up in the Jumbotron. And so, mind you, there's two screenshots. So it's I think it's the third and the fourth in the Jumbotron if you want to follow along while Uncle Screwtape speaks. So without further ado, I give you Uncle Screwtape.
Honey Badger, just out of curiosity now, Sir Will is here. Am I continuing on, or is Will taking
So
over?
I'm sorry. So Will's going to read the next letter, and so you guys are going to have a field day unpacking this, I believe. So like, thank you so much. Please go ahead, Will, Uncle Screwtape. Will
Oh,
you?
okay. Va bene. My dear Wormwood, I have been in correspondence with Slum Trimpet, who is in charge of your patient's young woman, and begin to see the chink in her armor. It is an unobtrusive little vice which she shares with nearly all women who have grown up in an intelligent circle united by a clearly defined belief, and it consists in a quite untroubled assumption that the outsiders who do not share this belief are really too stupid and ridiculous. The males who habitually meet these outsiders do not feel that way. Their confidence, if they are confident, is of a different kind. Hers, which she supposes to be due to faith, is in reality largely due to the mere colour she has taken from her surroundings. It is not, in fact, very different from the conviction she would have felt at the age of 10 that the kind of fish knives used in her father's house were the proper or normal or real kind, while those of the neighbouring families were not real fish knives at all. Now, the element of ignorance and naivety in all this is so large, and the element of spiritual pride so small, that it gives us little hope of the girl herself. But have you thought of how it can be made to influence your own patient? It is always the novice who exaggerates. The man who has risen in society is over-refined. The young scholar is pedantic. In this new circle, your patient is a novice. Here is their daily meeting, Christian life of equality he never enchanted, never before imagined, and seeing it all through an enchanted glass, because he is in love. Oh.
Will?
Yeah, 1 second.
He needs a drink of water.
So yeah, I just had to I just had a coughing fit because
He was in love.
he's in love. He is anxious indeed. The enemy commands him to imitate this quality. Can you get him to imitate this defect in his mistress and to exaggerate it until what was venial in her becomes in him the strongest and most beautiful of the vices? Spiritual pride. The conditions seem ideally favorable. The new circle in which he finds himself is one of which he is tempted to be proud for many reasons other than its Christianity. It is a better educated, more intelligent, more agreeable society than any he has yet encountered. He is also under some degree of illusion as to his own place in it. Under the influence of love, he may still think himself unworthy of the girl, but he is rapidly ceasing to think himself unworthy of the others. He has no notion how much in him is forgiven because they are charitable and made the best of because he is now one of the family. He does not dream how much of his conversation, how many of his opinions are recognized by them all as mere echoes of their own. Still less does he suspect how much of the delight he takes in these people is due to the erotic enchantment which the girl, for him, spreads all over her surroundings. He thinks that he likes their talk and way of life because of some congruity between their spiritual state and his, when in fact they are so far beyond him that if he were not in love, he would be merely puzzled and repelled by much which he now accepts. He is like a dog, which should imagine it understood firearms because its hunting instinct and love for its master enable it to enjoy a day's shooting. Here is your chance. While the enemy, by means of sexual love and of some very agreeable people far advanced in his service, is drawing the young barbarian up to levels he could never otherwise have reached, you must make him feel that he is finding his own level, that these people are his sort, and that, coming among them, he has come home. When he turns from them to other society, he will find it dull, partly because almost any society within his reach is, in fact, much less entertaining, but still more because he will miss the enchantment of the young woman. You must teach him to mistake this contrast between the circle that delights and the circle that bores him, for the contrast between Christians and unbelievers. He must be made to feel, he'd better not put it into words, how different we Christians are. And by we Christians, he must really, but unknowingly mean my set. And by my set, he must mean not the people who, in their charity and humility, have accepted me, but the people with whom I associate by right. Success here depends on confusing him. If you try to make him explicitly and professedly proud of being a Christian, you will probably fail. The enemy's warnings are too well known. If, on the other hand, you let the idea that we Christians drop out altogether and merely make him complacent about his set, you will produce not true spiritual pride, but merely social vanity, which by comparison is a trumpery, puny little sin. What you want is to keep a sly self-congratulation mixing with all his thoughts and never allow to raise him to the question, what precisely am I congratulating myself about? The idea of belonging to an inner ring, of being in a secret, is very sweet to him. Play on that nerve. Teach him, using the influence of this girl, when she is the silliest, to adopt an air of amusement at the things that unbelievers say. Some theories which he may meet in modern Christian circles may here prove helpful. Theories, I mean, that place the hope of society in some inner ring of clerks, some trained minorities of theocrats. It is no affair of yours whether these theories are true or false. The great thing is to make Christianity a mystery religion, in which he feels himself one of the initiates. Pray do not fill your letters with rubbish about this European war. Its final issue is, no doubt, important, But that is a matter for the High Command. I am not in the least interested in knowing how many people in England have been killed by bombs. In what state of mind they died, I can learn from the office at this end. That they were going to die sometime, I knew already. Please, keep your mind on your work. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
So I'm going to ask the the other Screwtape gentleman. Would you like to give your initial thoughts on that letter?
I shall. Appreciate you asking, because I also will look to depart after doing so at this late hour, because although I am Batman, I do still sleep when necessary. But that is to say that it seems in this passage the main aim of Screwtape in this case is to target the seemingly positive forces, the opposing forces that hold this individual away from them, or protects him from Screwtape, to as also his weakness, specifically through this, his care and his love for this woman, and the idea that through exercising that will seemingly make him desperate, right, in the aid of protecting and essentially protecting that very thing, that girl, the family, and also by essentially it's speaking to bastardizing the influence that this young man is having through the girl, the family as well, and therefore aiming to corrupt, in which he previously states in the chapter 23. It's the idea that when he said, don't quote me on it, but it's about corrupting spirituality in this case. And here it's almost him laying out the plans as to how he will do so. So those are my initial general thoughts on that, but without getting too specific in the nuances of it all, which I'm sure you guys will take care of plenty.
Well, with respect to that you have to go to sleep, I was going to wait until everybody spoke just to kind of give sort of a personal witness to this, because this chapter really made me fall flat on my face, and it was like an aha moment for me. So if I can share this, and speaking of the young lady, she's surrounded by a very good family that she champions. And so, for example, there's 9 of us, and my family, I can't say this without laughing. My family was voted Family of the Year by our parish 3 years in a row. Now, I'm not bragging. I actually had to laugh, because if you could have been a fly on the wall to the absolute chaos that my family was, uh, you know, you would probably get a good chuckle of it too. But this is what I internalized as a very young girl. I mean, before I was even a teenager, like in grade school even. And so my family is the best of families, and my faith is the best of faiths. And it wasn't that I was being disingenuous, but there was, now reflecting on it, there was sort of an innocent arrogance as he speaks about the way that she sees it very, like, uh, the men don't see it that way, but she's so ignorant, you know that she will see this, and look at everybody else that doesn't think like her as stupid or ignorant, and that her dad's fish knives or whatever were obviously the right ones. So everything about her life was the correct way to live. So, um, without admonishing myself too much, because who doesn't have pride in their family? Women tend to really uh, defer to their families in terms of, especially if you have a good one, because I was truly blessed with a very good family, or I am truly blessed with a very good family and a very good dad, and um, so it led me, when men would ask me out, or the men that I fell in love with, that weren't Catholic, or really even had an inkling of any faith, were raised in no faith. And so the men I truly fell in love with had no sense of faith, and he really came from a rough background. And so I figured, well, of course he'll become a Christian. Of course he'll be, and he was very romanticized by my faith. As a matter of fact, I was I took the first thing I did was take him to mass with me, you know, and I was kind of excited for him to be exposed to not only this faith, but my wonderful family, because he came from an extremely broken background. And he treated me like an absolute princess. As a matter of fact, he called me his angel. Now, isn't that lovely and flattering? But isn't that a horrible responsibility to put on another human being? So I digress. Moving forward, what happened was he really did fall in love with this idea of family. I always called him a Catholic enthusiast, because he supported me, but he didn't ever decide to convert. What He was very proud of his rough upbringing, because he believed that this made him much stronger than everyone else around him. So eventually, this came he same friends from like preschool, and they all grew up in very rough circumstances, and this was sort of like, and whatever girls like his friends were dating, he would sort of throw it in their faces a little bit, like, well, this is my wife, and she's this kind of a person. But what ended up happening was he eventually found himself superior to both sets, because he found this like consolation and this validation in a strong family and in faith. But then he could go to his friends, which was something he believed that none of us could ever understand. He had such street wisdom that we were ignorant as well. So both sets were ignorant, and so at the end of the day, it became this belief that he knew everything and he was validated in every sort of a way by everyone. And at a certain point, when he didn't need the validation of my family, or I guess he basically thought he had it all figured out, I became a hindrance to the other side, more so than I was a benefit. And again, I only share that because this chapter obviously is very directly relatable in my heart. I mean, the way that I see it, but in my own experience. And so I don't know that it well defines this letter, but it really did resonate with me on that score, in terms of how Screwtape used this girl to advance his needs and his desires, and through her ignorance also, what I believe, and without going, I could be wrong, because I honestly don't remember the next two chapters. I have to go through them and study them. But what I believe is going to start to happen is that he is going to see himself as someone who knows everything about everyone, and you know find himself disillusioned with everything around him. So I know you got to go to bed, gentlemen, but thanks for sticking around for that dissertation. I only want to share that, of course, because you're my friend. So as we knew.
What a lovely background, what a lovely story, and what a lovely family you have. So I look forward to meeting them one day.
As you will, sir. So thank you so much. Sweet dreams. And what time is it there again? Just also in empathy to Will.
4 on the nose.
Ay, ay, ay.
Time's relative. On my home world of Zod, it's currently 2027. But here in the UK, it's currently 4 minutes past 4.
Okay.
Might I say, it's also a pleasure to meet you as well, formally. Well, overdue at the very least. So.
Well, pleasant dreams, Batman. And tell your lovely lady I said hello, and I'm looking forward to meeting her as well.
That I shall. Good evening, all. It's been a pleasure.
Good evening, love.
Pax Vobis.
Good night.
What was
Okay.
funny about that? What was funny about that?
Everything about it was funny, Will. Not as funny
Perfect.
as Carrie down there, but we'll get a chance to hear him in a minute, I hope.
Yeah, I told him. I mean, where was he? I mean, he was just standing behind the door when God was handing out the vows. So we can't. We've got to be kind to him.
I'll be kind to him, and I'm sick of it. Good to see you, Carrie. We'll talk to you in a second. So, any insights, Miss Dominique?
Well, so this to me was reminiscent of the journey of the new convert, who becomes so convicted with their newfound faith that they know more about the faith than the Pope does. And it seems that was kind of what hit me. And she has this lovely sort of beautiful faith where, even though, as Screwtape points out, she thinks that people who don't understand it are quite stupid. She doesn't come across as being overbearing or arrogant about it. But he understands that when the patient absorbs this idea that, well, if you don't believe the way we believe, you must be stupid. The patient will become that arrogant, overbearing, prideful, pompous Christian, who is going to point out everybody's failings, and I am smarter than everybody else. So that's where that kind of my sense of it anyway. And the other thing is this notion that and pride is so woven through every single one of these chapters. And so this was what really rung through with me, this idea again of feeding the pride, of making our faith our own in the most prideful sense of the way, rather than allowing ourselves to be filled with the Holy Spirit and be inspired and grow in humility. We become the authority to whom everybody must bow. And we have to be very cautious about that. So this idea that I am going to be the smartest person in the room. I understand the faith better than anybody else. How I live out my faith is the best way to do it. It's all about I and me and mine, taking that ownership again. So it just, to me, this was just reminiscent of all of the other chapters before it. And it's one of the dangers. We have to be careful, right? And having lived through this in my reversion, where, when I finally thought I understood everything, until I realized that the more I thought I understood, the less I really did understand, and I had to give it up to faith. So those were my initial thoughts as I was reading through the chapter.
Yep. And I can directly relate to everything that you just said, Dominic. um, so, well, okay, we're not going to keep Carrie waiting much longer, are we, Will? Can I bring him up?
I
Uh,
actually don't have anything. I don't particularly enjoy this chapter at all. I think it's quite like I think it's a repristination of things that Screwtape said already. So with that, I yield my time, if I may, Madam Speaker, to the inimitable Carrie Phillips. Croeso a Screwtape.
Well, that's very disappointing. Go ahead, Carrie.
I mean, he's gone from calling me a druid now to calling me
Well,
Screwtape.
actually, also, I just bared my heart on this chapter, and he's like, meh,
I
this
know.
one's stupid. Let's move
I know.
forward.
Remarkable, isn't it? He calls me effectively a demon and says to you, "Nah, this one's rubbish. You and your life story, get out of here." Oh, yes. Well, I happen to think this is probably the best thing Lewis ever wrote, is this very particular chapter. Shame about the butchery in the reading. I mean, it could have gone a heck of a lot better if you'd got a real actor to do it, somebody who knows what they're doing. That would have been wonderful. I'm still waiting for your call, Miss Honey Badger. I don't know if you've got the wrong number or what it is, or my agent is trying to diddle me out of more money, whatever it is, whatever the reason. But here we go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you following me?
Am I following you?
Yeah.
No, I mean you should. I mean, it seems you're following me. Oh, follow back, done.
Harry, please get to the text, please. You're showing me up now.
In this particular chapter, what strikes out at me, there's this beautiful little just throwing it in there. And Lewis is a master of this, where in a sentence he can open up a rabbit hole that sends you, if you know where you're looking, down 150 years of philosophy back to a point which takes you back a further 300 years. And it's very reminiscent of an Egyptian story where he invokes this idea of a figure that presents to you the hidden life, but not in the way that we as artists would talk of it, but as a demon, as the devil would talk of it. And it's this idea of there will be more revealed to you. Don't you want to be as God? And it's the line that Screwtape says, we must turn it into a mystery religion. That's the way. Because it reminds me of the story of Thoth and Ra. Because Thoth comes to the gods of Egypt and says, we've got to mess around with these people now because they're annoying me. Because I'm the god of intelligence, of hidden wisdom. And I want all of the people of Egypt to be as wise as I. And they keep forgetting how to do things. So I'm going to give them writing. How about that? And all the gods are very scared of Thoth. And they're like, no, I'm very good, Master Thoth. Until finally it gets to Ra. And Ra's the sun god. He sees humans every day. He's looking down. He says, you can't give these idiots writing because they'll just write down all of their mistakes and they will be held by the tyranny of the written word. And Thoth, not wanting to anger the sun itself, says, okay, well, we'll come to an agreement. And they deliberate back and forth. And ultimately, they come to an agreement that writing will be given to mankind, but only to the scribes. Now, this is the downfall of my culture. This has been the downfall of many a culture where you have this selectivity in terms of who gets to know, who gets to hold all of the knowledge. It is ultimately the tool the devil has, is to put that back in your heads. Some people will get to know, and they will be as God. So let's turn it into a mystery religion, says good old Uncle Screwtape. Resist, resist, resist. Pretty much all I have. I could do a joke about a rabbi and a clown car, but I think I'll probably leave that.
I think we had the thrust of it there, Kerry. Thank you very much. Please shut up,
I
please,
want to
before
hear
everybody starts preferring him to me. Please, no, please, everybody.
Yeah, you shut up too, Adele. Okay, whatever. Well, I guess we'll give you a shake, Adele.
I just want to hear the joke. I mean, I don't care what I was going to say. No, what I was going to say is that I think that it was very relevant to your story, and I wanted to, and not that you need it, but I wanted to give some validation that isolation through pride has a lot to do with what we live with every day, and I think that was very relevant to you, and not just to you, but to many people.
Well, you said something good for once. Praise God.
That's only
Carrie,
because I was validating you, I'm sure.
of course. Carrie, did you want to follow up on Adele's brilliance?
How could I? I mean, that was just a spun gold, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're getting here. You can call her Adele Rumpelstiltskin from now on.
I need to read that story to my daughter.
I was thinking Rapunzel, and I think you got your analogy screwed up there. Well, I guess maybe not spun gold. I was thinking of long, beautiful blonde hair. But yeah, I guess that works too. Thank you.
I mean, there's literally gold being spun in the story that I've got. You got to make a heck of a leap to Rapunzel.
Oh my gosh, but I just think about your story and it makes me think about the scribes and the people that were allowed to write, and it transcends so many books, and it's just crazy how the story is so much the same but different.
I'm
Completely off
surprised.
topic, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm surprised some people get to speak. Now mute up. So please, Dominique, would you like to give any other thoughts about this letter before it goes ridiculously off?
No,
the
I'm just
rails.
enjoying listening to Carrie and how much it's irritating Will. That's the fun part. It's this, isn't this the example of the pride that we're trying to avoid? I don't know.
It
No,
would be if it weren't. It would be if it weren't scripted, Dominique. You've got to understand. So again, once
yeah, you
again,
sound like a hater, Dominique. Just
you're
saying.
once again, Dominic. You're playing checkers and we're playing chess.
Months in the planning, dear girl. Months in the planning. Hours in the rehearsal room.
But I think Kerry brings up this, as always. Kerry does bring up this brilliant point, which is actually he, Carrion is as a Cavaroith, as a storyteller, um, uh, more than a storyteller, a druid and a storyteller, a gentleman and a scholar, does actually kind of blow this letter up into macro proportions, which we kind of again we've got the pyramid being built from the top down rather than the bottom up, which is um this idea of this mystery religion, this secret knowledge, which is a very dangerous stage of having a relationship with God, having a relationship with being quote unquote spiritual. That we all have to toe the line of negotiating. How many people do we know on this platform or in our own personal lives at the moment who believe that somehow a small group of people around them have like access to this secret knowledge that somehow if somebody doesn't kneel in the right way or doesn't bow in the right way or cross themselves from right to left instead of left to right, somehow people form an identity out of this kind of weird like this mystery cultish thing, and it's very satisfying, isn't it? It's very it's nice to feel like you're part of the in crowd. And this again is another tool that Screwtape is encouraging Wormwood to employ his patient to use. That is again, remember the theme that we're getting to in these later chapters in Screwtape is I always feel that Screwtape is getting desperate in these later chapters. The last third, like the last like third from the last half onwards, Screwtape is no longer talking in these bold kind of, oh, I can distract, I can do this. He's getting to the stage now where he's referring to things that are going to be inevitable. Wormwood's patient has found God. He's become a Christian. He's dating. He's looking at the things that matter. He's looking at solid substance. Whatever's going on with the war. All that he can do is flip or invert or pervert what is already in the mind and heart and soul of his patient, which is why he's kind of encouraging this mystery religion thing. And we all know how seductive and attractive that can be from one degree or another. You know, we all want to have the secret password, or we all want this or that or the other. And that's the only really enlightening thing that I can say about this chapter, because I feel like it's a repristination. Again, just to say point blank, say nothing of Nancy's extraordinarily generous contribution from her own past and her reflections on this, which really never go amiss. But we're getting to the stage now, just from a literary perspective, where Screwtape is actually getting a bit frantic, and he's referring to things he's already said, and you see those. If you've ever seen those on David Attenborough, you know, when there's nature TV programs where there are those um parasitic worms that burrow into wasps, kill them, and take over their nervous system. This is kind of where Screwtape is at this point. He's trying to still remain quiet and calm and collected, but he's pulling all of the tricks that we've already seen out of the bag, but he's referring them to the current, where the patient is at this particular period in time. That's why I find it kind of I don't have too much to say about it because it's just old tricks, new day, new tricks, new phone, who dis, all this kind of stuff. But fundamentally, he's this is how do you take something that's rightly ordered and proper, good and godly for the benefit of the soul of an individual and the people around him, and how do you turn it and corrupt it into something that is fundamentally destructive? You turn it into a mystery religion that is fundamentally exclusive rather than ordained to make an individual seek to include those who do not have that understanding yet? Do you cross yourself in the right way? Do you kneel in the right way? Do you do this in the right way? Do you do that in the right way? This is the last-ditch attempt of Screwtape speaking to Wormwood to try and corrupt what is going well for his patient, who is slipping further and further and further away from him.
I would like to put a fine point on that, if I may. And guys, I don't mean to speak in code if you're not Catholic, but I will share this with you. I went to, okay, so first, I'm quite proud of the university that I went to, which was Franciscan University, because it was rightly ordered, as opposed to some other Catholic universities who have just gone the way of the dinosaur. They're Catholic in name only. There was this tendency between us 18 to 22-year-olds to try to up-Catholic each other. You know, in other words, well, I know this, or well, I've been to Fatima, or etc. There was this tendency to, like, I just thought of that term off the top of my head, up-Catholic each other. And I've seen this recently, and again, this is where I'm saying I don't mean to speak in code, you guys, but the concept of the rosary, and being there's one full rosary, which is only the 3 rosaries, gets tossed around a lot, and it, because of, and I guess the defense, as it is, so to speak, is it translates to the 152 fish, John 21, 6 through 11. And so I was talking to my priest the other day about the luminous mysteries. There are a lot of Catholics that disavow the luminous mysteries because it doesn't speak to that specific full rosary. And my priest put it very well. He said, it's this pedantic desire to be right is what it appears. I said, yeah, Father, I get it, because I mean, like, Pope, this was conceived by Saint Pope John Paul II, and he's a saint, right? So, in other words, we pray litanies to the saints, and so if a saint, adds, especially as being Pope, adds a 4th rosary, then why would we not pray it? And he said, well, furthermore, there are all these things that are needed in society that are embodied in the luminous mysteries. The concept of family, the proclamation of the gospel, the concept of marriage, and the transfiguration, which is what we're all called to be. And that's where I got a hot dose of what it is to up-Catholic other people. And so I'm, again, when we get into these minutia conversations to sort of proclaim a better handle on our faith and spirituality, I think that this is probably what this entire letter is about, and Screwtape is advising to keep us in that conversation, to keep us thinking that we have a better spirituality because we know something. Does that make sense, or am I going all over the rails?
No, I think that's very sound, and I just threw up. This came up recently from, just to be 100% clear. If you go down to, I just threw it up in the whatever it's called, the Fagatron or Gigatron, whatever it's called, the nest or thingy with Bob.
The
Yeah.
Xbox.
The Xbox or whatever, right? Whatever it's called. But just to be clear, if you read down to the bottom, this is not a dunk on the original poster Stephen, who has been hosting Pray the Rosary for yonks. But and he does it every day, and there's a whole host of people who've been brought to the fullness of the Christian faith through through Pray the Rosary, and a lot of us met through Pray the
So many
Rosary.
of my ex-friends, like not ex-friends, like we're still friends, but my ex-friends, that were either like had fallen away from the faith or didn't know anything about the Catholic faith, have come into asking me questions about how do I, how do I become Catholic because of that space.
Right.
So,
But I did this was an example where, sometimes we have to, as part of my job in a way, to just hold my hand up and say, God love you, but you've got X and Y and Z a tiny bit wrong on X and Y and Z. And some people have a problem with the luminous mysteries and some people don't. But here's up there is the backstory of why it's 100% fine and kosher, for want of a better expression. But you see on a whole raft of issues unrelated to this particular one, that it goes back to, again, as I say, these very early letters, I think it's in the first 10 letters of Screwtape, about paying attention to the way that people are dressed, who are standing next to you in church. And you know the Holy Father recently, in his 60-minute interview, was speaking about the dogmatic box, of people closing themselves up in this tiny box that has no doors and has no windows, and feeling very good that they've got the grace of God and they've got the sacraments, but they've shut themselves in a box. And I'm talking more generally than about this specific rosary issue, just to be clear. um you know uh at the end of the day, we get grace uh, from the life that we live in the fullness of the sacraments. We get grace from it, but what are we supposed to do with that? Do we store it up as if it's gold or silver in a little treasure box? No, we get grace so that we can meet people where they are, and we can fellowship with people who are not there yet, and people who are searching, lost, inquiring, of different committed persuasions, and at the heart of all of this, people can very easily get focused, hyper focused on the tiniest fleck of difference, to the exclusion of the wealth of grace and commonality that exists between people from disparate places, different ideas, different mindsets, different abilities, different capabilities, different skill sets, different giftings, different nationalities, different ethnicities. And this is the thing that, again, we have to invert everything that Screwtape is saying in order to make sense of it for us as a positive word of encouragement. um, if you ever find yourself finding glee in any expression of your life or of your faith that others anybody else, and excludes them rather than encourages them to draw closer to you, you are on the cusp of being under the influence of Wormwood and Screwtape. You are on the cusp of being the high priest or high priestess of a mystery religion, which is really about you excluding rather than enticing and encouraging and welcoming people to have what you have. If what you have is really that good, specifically in the context of faith, you want to desire it for all. What is love? Desiring the good of another. And the second that you want to be loved, but do not want to love yourself, that is the beginning of this mystery religion that Screwtape is encouraging Wormwood to encourage and entice his patient into existing in and subsisting in.
um, so directly relatable again, and I will share something else with you that really hits on that point. I got to get a big family with a lot of stories. Okay, so my mom and dad, my dad's a farmer. My mom actually had to become a cleaning lady at a certain point, and this was after my five oldest siblings were kind of like they were kind of leaving the nest, and like, but they were older. So my mom was home with them, and everything was thriving in the dairy business, while they were home. And this is going to sound quite envious and jealous and resentful, but there's a better point here. So there's a 5-year split between my five oldest siblings and us four youngest. So they went to Catholic school. We didn't. We went to public school. They had mom at home. We didn't. Whatever. So what ended up happening is, like, long story short, my mother, who had no business ever believing that she could put all of her kids through this very expensive Catholic education, but she demanded that we all went to the University of Steubenville. And my older brothers and sisters fought tooth and nail, but anyways, there were four of them, like senior, junior, freshman, or a senior, junior, sophomore, freshman. They became so insulting to my mother and father at a certain point because my mother and father were not highly Catholic educated. All they were faithfully Catholic. So, in other words, the hours and hours and hours of service to our parish, the hours and hours and hours that we prayed the rosary, the hours and hours and hours that they spent on their knees in adoration, in Eucharistic adoration, meant nothing because they didn't know about this, that, or the other canon doctrine. They couldn't explain it from this intellectual standpoint. And oh my gosh, life was like, we had such a hard upbringing because we went without anything. And it was not hard upbringing, but you get my point. Like, but so this arrogance and myself, so basically, if you look around to the four youngest of us, like my older brother Kevin, Michelle, my younger sisters Michelle and Pete, we would just be like, "You guys are jerks. Mom and Dad like did everything for us," and so this was like, this directly relates to that belief in, if I am a more educated Catholic, then somehow I am better, even for the people that laid their lives down for us. And the reason that I remain blessed with my faith today. Does that make sense, Will?
Oh, 100%, 100%. We've got to remember that when Our Lady, just quickly, because before we pass on, really quickly, we've got to remember that when Our Lady appeared to the shepherd children at Fatima, they'd never heard of St. Athanasius. They'd never heard of the Fourth Lateran Council. They'd never read the Code of Canon Law. They'd never read reams of papal encyclicals. They had the faith of a mustard seed, and they were children who were rightly ordered, had been raised properly, and inclined their ear to the will of God. And we've got to remember in this age, the Roman Fly wrote a brilliant article, who is the new Babylon Bee, since the Babylon Bee has now been cancelled for blasphemy. But the Roman Fly has a brilliant article about this called, it's about, this joke that, reading encyclicals is now necessary to ensure your salvation, right? That every time a new encyclical is published, that you have to press Control F and read the whole thing. We've got to remember that Our Lady appeared to a group of children, shepherd children, who could probably hardly read or write worth a damn. And if that's good enough for Our Lady, if it's good enough for God, then this is the standard of what we're expected to be. We've all got different offices to fulfill, but our faith is based on the impossible. Our faith in the impossible, which is that Christ became human, became incarnate, and rose from the dead. And we don't have to understand precisely how that works. We don't have to understand every dogmatic piece of theology one way or the other. We just have to have faith of a child, and that's enough.
My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God. Uh, the innocence of that child that was to bear the Savior of the world, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the author of life, the Prince of Peace, was born in a stable. Please go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, guys. Well, not Will. I mean, he's a crashing bore. I mean, God, blimey, it's 4:30 in the morning here, and I'm struggling to stay awake as it is, and then I'm being lulled into some
This is
kind of panicked
this is
dream.
what
It's like,
happens. You give the little people just a taste of power, and it goes to their head like strong drink.
So
Well, I'm not Irish. Stop calling me a little person. So the oh so the
oh, I'm sorry. There's a mute glitch. Go ahead, little Irish person. Gary, are you still with us?
you muted
I
me just
didn't
to
do.
get
Did
that
I
gag
do
in.
that?
I mean, yeah, it felt like it. That felt malicious and unfair. I'm just giving the people what they want. No, this all it reminds me quite a bit of there was a girl in school with me who it's strange in Wales in the Catholic schools nearby, they're all state schools as well, they aren't private, and they do tend to be the better schools, and they kind of compete alongside the Welsh language schools for being the best at sport, being the best in grades, and half of the Catholics go to the Welsh language schools, and then the Catholic schools have just other people in there, I guess, mostly not Catholic, in Swansea at least. It was really discombobulating. And we had a girl in my year who was very devout Catholic and very studious. And she, I think, suffered from the same affliction you were describing, which was she was trying to up Catholic all the time. And she was a voracious reader, and she had this obsession with Wales being the land of 1,000 saints, and how lucky she was that she had all of these hagiographies she could read and go into all the saints. And she said she was going to pick at random a saint's life to follow, and that's what she was going to do, and that's how she could finally go after mass with all the other girls who are like, oh, I've done this in my family, I'm going here, and she could go, yeah, well, I'm going to be Saint whatever this year. And she picked out Saint Tabia, who is a fascinating saint, one of the daughters of King Brychan. But unfortunately, she was martyred when she went to the area of Llandybia and was murdered by Irish pagans as she was trying to set up a commune. And I thought, that's going to be a hard example to follow. I mean, you're gonna have to go down to the docks in Port Talbot and just into a working man's club and just, I don't know, ask to be killed. I mean, that's not gonna be it. And I think she realized at that point that, oh yeah, this is a bit silly. I should just concentrate on my faith, perhaps. And yeah, that's all from me. I'm gonna go to bed now.
Oh no, you are not. So, so taking a step forward, I think it's kind of like be careful what you think is what was the last letter, the 23rd letter, the social justice, the social justice warrior Christian, that kind of sounds like your dear friend, whomever she was, and I will pray for her. But also, I'm going to say this too. Spoiler alert: you actually reminded me of the next when we're done with the Screwtape letters. I am going to do the next series on the book Till We Have Faces. And if you haven't read that book, as a matter of fact, I'm going to share Peter Kreeft's lecture on that book because it's very sparse in its writing. It's basically the retelling of Eros and from Greek mythology, but through a Christian perspective. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book. But Peter Kreeft does just an astonishing lecture at Boston College on that particular book, and so that's where we're going to go to next. And when you were talking about your friend from school, or maybe you had a crush on her and you just don't want to admit it because she was so cool, but whatever. Because she seemed like like she kept her face hidden, but she knew everything. I don't know, but yeah, but point being that
Hey, wait a sec. Hang on now. Lest this get out into the public with all my old school friends. One thing that is a universal truth in South Wales is if you have a contingency of Catholics in your year, they are almost all the best looking boys and almost all the best looking girls. Yes, we will fancy all the Catholic girls. And yes, all the girls will have a crush on the far taller, already has a mustache at 14,
Wait a minute, wait a minute. You
or
just
6
said
foot
you're the wee
4.
people. And by the way, I have 3 brothers that are over 6'4". Now I'm half Polack and
There you go.
half Irish. So I guess like I really think that the handsomeness and the height came from my Polack roots.
I'm just
Yeah, but
just
there's
out of
look,
interest, Kerry. Have you are you Catholic, or are we of those, or were you Druid, half Druid, semi Druid, hemi
uh,
Druid,
uh, I'm a, I'm a demi
demi
druid.
Druid,
I'm a demi
demi
druid.
Druid?
Druid curious. Is what I am.
Less of that, please. Less
Not
of that, please.
not to be confused with a version of the Bible that sounds a little bit like that. Was it Jury?
The key.
No. DR.
Oh, the Duerim.
Yes. Not to be confused with that. Like you said something weird, Gary, but thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he says things that are weird all the time. He was standing behind the door when God was handing out the vowels at the dawn of the world. He's only got, bless him, he's only got W with a weird little umbrella over it, and Y. He's got A, E, W, 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 and always Y. Those are his vowels.
The animosity between England and Ireland is palpable right now.
Wales.
Oh, Wales. Oh, yeah,
Different country.
even worse. Yeah, even worse.
A lot of C between us. Will speaks several languages. He speaks them quite beautifully, of course. I mean, I've never met somebody who signs off normal personal conversations with Pax Vobis. It's quite remarkable. He's just jealous, though, that he doesn't speak the chiefest and indeed only indigenous language on the island that he has made his home as an interloper, as an incomer. And he's not going to feel totally at home. He's going to feel like the outsider that he is, as the invader, as the Saxon pig farmer that he is, until he gets back to Friesland with all of his brothers and sisters.
Well, Carrie, thank you for sharing. I pardon me for mistaking you as Irish. Now that I know you're Welsh, I have unfollowed you. So please go ahead, Dominique.
Rightly so. The proper, rightly ordered, Nancy. Rightly ordered.
Miss Dominique, please go ahead, love.
Well, I'm just going to say goodnight because this old lady's tired. And even though it's not 4:00 in the morning, I got to be up around then. So I wanted to say goodnight. I tried to sneak away, but Nancy called me back.
I wanted you to say goodnight.
Aw, well, good night. And Carrie, it's just such a joy to have you in a space. Honestly, I wish you'd join our spaces more often. And Will, I love you. I'm a little annoyed with you right now, but I'll forgive you, I guess, at some point. Not that it matters. Seriously.
What?
Oh, I'm annoyed with you too, Dominique. I'm annoyed with you so much. I'm annoyed with you too. Nobody could be, Joe Biden could never be as annoyed as with anybody as I am. Bigly, could be very big. Many such cases.
But it's okay because I don't really exist anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Dominic, did you not meet Kerry on Saturday last?
Yes, well, I did hear him. Yes, I was in the background listening to him, and I just.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Have you recovered yet? Have you recovered?
Yes, just barely though. But
Okay, let's not start a holy war. Okay,
no holy war here.
Yeah.
Love you guys. A great space as always. I really enjoyed it, and we'll see you on Saturday. Will.
Okay, so the takeaway from these 2 letters is this: let's not look at Jesus as a historical figure through arrogance of education, and certainly let's not reduce ourselves to our families in terms of why we're better than other people. And when people are coming to the faith, We need to remember that we are setting an example. But at the end of the day, we have to also identify faith and works and reason. All three have to exist. And finally, I would like to say, don't try to up-Catholic each other, you guys. You know, let's have good conversations and really understand that some of the most faithful, devout people amongst us are the most humble. And, you know, like I talked about my parents, of course, you know, but the most humble beginnings came through the Lord of Lords, through the Prince of Peace, through Jesus Christ, through Jesus through Mary. And Saint Joseph was the perfect order of the only human being that actually was part of this divinity of Mary and the Son of God, Jesus Christ. And let us also remember Saint Joseph is our protector, he's our defender, and he really is the one human being that set our souls ablaze. And he was a mere carpenter. And so he was not an educated man, but he had faith and he had works. So that being said, I'm going to end the space. Thank you guys so much. But I'm going to end it with a few prayers. So please, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the divine power of God, cast into hell Satan and all of the other evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the destruction of souls. O most blessed Virgin Mary, let it be that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored your help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petition, but in your mercy hear and answer me. And I raise up Will in his health, and I raise up everybody that has graciously joined this space. And my prayers are all with you, and God bless you guys. And we're ending now. God bless you. Ave Maria.